Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Combating Cancer. My name is Gwen Kelly, and I'm your host. A little bit of background information about me for my first-time listeners here is that I was diagnosed with stage 3 astrocytoma brain cancer at the age of 19. The reason why I created this platform is because I wanted to bring on people that were either going through treatment, active remission, or have lost a loved one, or as a caregiver could come on, share their experiences. So today I have Gary Gross, who's going to be talking about his experience of his wife going through pancreatic cancer and how he was able to provide for her and be a caregiver. So hi, Gary. How are you?
Hey, Gwen, how's it going?
Good. I'm so glad we connected. I think we connected on LinkedIn, which is always fun.
We did. And I need to ask, is this just audio or also video?
It's audio, but I can pull video if you want.
Well, I was going to let people see my shirt, but we can just talk about the shirt instead.
Yes, we can talk about the shirt.
So absolutely. The shirt says, for those of you that have reading glasses and can't read the fine print, it's called Purple Stride, and it's a walk to end pancreatic cancer. And it's by the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, or pancan.org. Each cancer sector, if you will, typically has some sort of action network where you can reach out to them and they'll help you through your journey. And since my wife had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, we relied a lot on Pan and friends who unfortunately had their own journey with pancreatic cancer and lost their journeys. Fortunately, my wife is now 8 years out of chemo, NED, no evidence of disease. Thank goodness. They call her a miracle because pancreatic cancer typically is only about a 5 to 9%, 3 to 5 year survival rate. So it's interesting because we'll go in and sit in front of our oncologist. He just leans back, crosses his arms and says, I got nothing. There's nothing for us to do. You're like perfectly cured. And we always hate to use that word, but here's what the big marker is. Every cancer treatment has their typical markers that you look for when you do blood or diagnostic exams. In pancreatic cancer, one of the markers is CA19-9. And what they look for, if I were to take that test right now, that blood test right now, 0 to 37 is considered normal. So I hopefully would be in that 0 to 37 range. When my wife started her journey, she was at 1,990.
Wow.
So she went from there to less than 3.
Oh my goodness.
It's not an end all or a catch all, but it's a huge marker that tells you whether you're progressing, regressing, or whatever, right?
Wow. How did she find out she was diagnosed in the first place? Was it she went in for just like an annual physical, got the blood work, and it came up like you were saying, or were there other signs? What was going on?
Yeah, interesting, because she had been having difficulty digesting meat. And she just thought, okay, great. Maybe it's my gallbladder. She had a little back pain. She had a little abdominal pain. And my sister had had her gallbladder taken out. So we thought, oh, that's what it is. So she went to have that checked. This was in the time that I was with IBM. And in those days, you were on a plane 2-3 days a week. So I was on the road, and 8:30 in the morning, I'm sitting at a breakfast meeting with a client, and she calls. And I've always told anybody that I'm sitting in front of, I don't care who you are in business. If a loved one calls, I'm taking the call. I can always get another client.
So funny you bring that up, because that is the same way as my dad. He has his own business. He's been running it for 25 plus years. His entire motto is, if one of us calls, he's picking it up. He does not care where he is, who he's with. If it's the most important meeting of his life, he says family always comes first, because you never know what type of call you're going to get.
Exactly. And so you're assuming it's not bad. But she said the results were not good. I need to get home. Shook my client's hand, stood up, drove to the airport, took the next flight back to Atlanta. She then had subsequent tests, and it was revealed that she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer that had already metastasized outside of the pancreas to her liver. So as you unfortunately know all too well, when you are told that you have the big C, there's a couple of things that happen. Your knees buckle, you can't breathe, you blurt out F-bombs because you don't necessarily believe what you just heard.
Mm-hmm.
And then reality sits in and you start saying, now what? I mean, literally, I don't care who you are in the world. You have that moment where you go, now what?
Yep.
So the what was we started reaching out to potential oncologists. I had a friend who unfortunately was going through his journey with pancreatic cancer. And he asked me, he didn't offer, he asked first and said, do you want me to make any referrals for you? And I said, yeah. In less than 30 hours, we had the names and contacts, and we'd already reached out to surgeons, oncologists, and different oncologists.
So you got the ball rolling pretty quickly once you found out.
Yeah. So my wife and I are both business people. And as you know, and your dad knows, as a business person, you have that OF. And then it's like, okay, now what do we do? You do a plan. And the plan was, okay, who do we need to call? What do we need to do? That's step one. So we started doing that. We didn't sit down and open up a bottle of whiskey and drink it all down and go like, now what?
Yeah, that was the following weekend.
That was the following day, actually. But we unfortunately had to go through those things. And my friend got us in to see his surgeon at one of the big institutions, extremely well-known institutions here in Atlanta. He got us in like less than 48 hours. And we also, that was in the lunchtime area. And then later that day, we had a meeting up at another hospital closer towards we live, about 30 miles north of the city, with an oncologist. So the morning that we were going to the surgeon, we had been together for a couple of years, and we talked about getting married, but we hadn't become engaged or gotten married yet. And she looked at me the first thing in the morning and said, I just can't do this. I can't do this alone.
Mm-hmm.
She said, but it's not fair to you. I'm not going to bring you into this, and I will think not anything bad of you if you want to leave right now.
Isn't that crazy? I always say this when I'm speaking to people that are talking about a loved one that has cancer, where they say one of the first immediate responses is they care more about you than themselves right away.
Exactly. And that makes you love them even more. Of course, I said, well, no. And then I said, you're never going to be alone, ever. And I said, I'm not going anywhere. And I reached around on the nightstand for anything, and I found a rubber band. And I took this rubber band, and I twisted it up, and I put it on her finger. I said, will you marry me? And she said, yes, of course. And I said, okay, well, what do you want to do today? You want to get married? Because we've got these appointments. So by 9 o'clock in the morning, when the county clerk's office opened, we went and got a marriage certificate, called around, because in Georgia, they no longer do justice of the peace. So you have to go to a lawyer's office or a judge. So I didn't know that at the time. And so long story short, we found a lawyer, got him on the phone. He said, well, when do you want to do this? I said, well, what are you doing in a couple hours? He said, come on down. I called my sister who was living in Atlanta at the time. I said, what are you doing at 11 o'clock? You want to witness us getting married? So she met us at the lawyer's office. 11:15, we got married. 12:30 that day, we were at the university hospital with the surgeon, listened to the surgeon for over an hour. Then he finally came out and said, based on your scans, you're not a surgical candidate. Well, thank you for taking over an hour of our time just to tell us that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then we drove up north to the oncologist at 3 o'clock. There's a Southern saying down here that says, bless your heart. And that's not necessarily a good thing. He patted her on her shoulder and said, bless your heart. We'll make you comfortable.
Oh,
So basically saying, I got nothing and we're just going to put you in hospice. And she looked him right in the eye, said some expletives and said, that's not what we're looking for. So my friend, we told him that. He said, well, I've got this guy who I went to that you're going to love. He made a call. We got in to see that guy in less than a day and a half. But meanwhile, the day of our wedding, we left that oncologist's office. We went to a little Italian restaurant that we knew. Couldn't really eat because we were so stressed. Had some champagne, and that was our wedding night. But within 48 hours, we were in this oncologist's office who was extremely well known in the pancreatic cancer field. He had told us about a potential trial that he thought we were a good candidate for. Long story short, about 2 inches thick worth of paperwork. We read through everything, went back like the next day and said, yep, we're going to sign it. Let's do it. And my wife looked at this doctor who was very well known, and she looked at him and pointed at him and said, I am not going to let this define me. I'm a fighter. I will beat this and I will make you famous. She pointed right at him and said, now let's get this shit started.
I love that.
He leaned back and clapped and said, "That's the exact attitude we need." We started the process. My wife worked 95% of the time that she went through 18 chemo treatments over 9 months. And they have said that that was a humongous contributing factor to her beating this, because your body was working all the time and churning. And you weren't sitting back and just saying, "Woe is me, why me? This isn't right." So our routine for 9 months was, because of the trial, when we went to the infusion center, we were in a certain bay. And what I mean by bay is they have like 3 chairs on one side and 3 chairs on the other. And then they have various columns of that. So in our particular bay was those for the trial. So every Monday, even though they would provide treats and fluid and so forth, we would pack a breakfast and a lunch, pack our briefcases, bring all of our computer gear, all of our work stuff, all of the electronics we needed, extension cords and everything. We always sat in the same corner and we camped out for 10 hours. And that was on Mondays. On Wednesdays, she would go back in and they'd fit her with the pump, because you may have experienced this as well. It's a small portable infusion pump that continues the process even though you're not sitting there having chemo. And we did this for 9 months, 18 treatments. In a very short period of time, she went from 1990 to 440 to 200, and she kept progressing. We found out much later on, many years later, that the trial was unsuccessful. The FDA decided that with 55% compliance and efficacy, it just wasn't enough to continue going forward with what they call additional arms, which are additional processes. So the good news and the bad news, we found out, and this is something that every one of your listeners should take to heart. Whatever type of cancer you have, you should talk to your team and ask them, if you haven't already done this, should I get your DNA checked? And they're looking for what you're responsive and what you're not responsive to. So in my wife's case, she was BRCA1 positive. Now, BRCA1 positive, the good news is a large majority of people with pancreatic are receptive to platinum-based chemo. That's why she had such great success early on. He put her on the highest type of triple cocktail she could have. But the downside is, with BRCA1 positive, you're also receptive to other types of cancers. But knowing that, you can be proactive. The problem with pancreatic cancer is the reason why you hear almost everybody that has it, and everybody from Steve Jobs to all these other people that have died, unfortunately, they're typically stage 4 because it doesn't what's called present. You don't have all these symptoms. You don't see these things because it's just internal until almost too late.
And that's scary that you don't know it's there until it's too late and it's stage 4. I know that better than anyone else myself. Kind of like your wife, having a little bit of back pain, not really like digesting meat the best. It seems like very normal things. And then all of a sudden you go in and they tell you that news and you're just like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And then what I admire about your wife, which is something very similar I did when I was diagnosed, is I still completed school. I worked out every single day and I still worked a job as well, because just like your wife, I didn't want cancer to define me. I wasn't going to be that girl that, oh, she has cancer, we're going to lay in bed, life is over. And you didn't let your wife go through that either, because you were right there with her the entire time. And you know, when you were supporting her, obviously, I'm sure there were those days where you're crying and don't want to fight anymore. How did you handle that?
Great question. It's really difficult to see a loved one go through the process, of course. Because we're both business people, we put a business plan together. And as you well know, they send you home with 8 million prescriptions, right? And they're never all taken at the same time. We put a spreadsheet together with every type of medicine, with the exact date and time that needed to be done, and we marked it. And for 9 months, we tracked it. We could go into the oncologist every meeting and know exactly when she took it. If it was outside, you had to take it every 2 hours. If it was 2 hours and 15 minutes, we knew that. Why did we do that? We did that because we didn't want to lose. We were not going to lose. And look at your athletic teams. Look at baseball teams and all the scouting they do. You always hear about the scouts. They know they can position the outfielders based upon what pitch the pitcher's going to throw, because they know where this hitter hits. They're doing their work. They don't want to lose. We're the same way. We did not want to lose, so we put the work in. But there were many days, many days, where between the crying and the pain, she'd be like, I'm done. I'm not going back. I'm not going to do this anymore. Just let it go. And I'd have to pull her off the ceiling more times than I can remember. So here's the thing with a caregiver. The caregiver really needs to be like a business consultant. They need to present the person with options. Here are the options. What do you want to do? And then if it's not the right answer, you have to be able to present options why that's not the right answer. You can't sit there and say, no, that's not right. You need to do this. You have to present options. So the options that I went through all the time with my wife was her mother was also dying of cancer. This was her third bout of cancer. And my wife couldn't spend as much time with her mother. So the options were, you need to get well so that you can be with your mother, or you need to take these pills, you need to do these treatments so that I have the time to go meet with your mother, whatever it was, right? It's mind games, but you are a consultant and it's hard. It's really hard. You have to not scream and holler, not demand, because they're already stressed out, right? She's lost her hair. And I don't know if did you lose your hair?
Oh, yeah, I lost my hair. That was probably one of the worst experiences ever. No matter who loses their hair, but especially women. I say this all the time, like hair makes or breaks your day in general. I was avoiding every mirror possible. It takes a toll on you not only physically, but mentally as well.
My wife knew a lot of hairdressers in the area, and one of the hairdressers had a person at his place that makes wigs. And she makes wigs out of human hair. And we went to her right away, got a number of wigs that were just amazing. So that helped a lot. But during that time, there was a very famous series of movies called Lord of the Rings. And there was a character on there, Gollum, but also called Smeagol. When she had just tufts of hair left, she'd say, well, just call me Smeagol. So it's detrimental to yourself, but also you have to have a little bit of levity. Not on a daily basis, because it's so devastating what people go through, and not everybody has a positive outcome. But you have to try and inject a little bit of levity somewhere at the right time. And that was her way of doing it. I mean, we spent $9,000 on a long human hair wig. And I was like, what?
Oh, yeah. My dad was cutting checks for my hair.
I was like, oh my gosh. I said, oh no, right? But, you know, you do it. If you think about it, who cares for the caregiver? The caregiver is giving everything they can emotionally, mentally, physically. Meanwhile, I'm still working 60, 70 hours a week, traveling, doing things. And then I had to stop my travel. Here's what people don't realize, where they need a patient advocate. A patient advocate, also a caregiver, could be two separate things. But as you remember, when you were going through your doctor's appointments and your treatments, mentally you're fried, you're zoned out because it's just not good, and you don't remember what they said. So a patient advocate / caregiver or really has to go on every appointment with the patient and take notes, and they have to be responsible for ensuring that the medications are brought, the medications are utilized, and the appointments are kept, and you pull somebody off the ceiling every day.
It's really interesting when you say this to me, because I'm like nodding my head in agreement. And then I'm also thinking at the same time, like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how much I like zoned out during the appointments. I'm always mentally done whenever I go into a hospital, still to this day, because I just don't want to be there. I spent too much of my life there. And I just am thinking, I'm like, oh wow, I already give my parents credit, but I just, when you said who takes care of the caregiver, that didn't even cross my mind, which I think that is just so huge that we're even having this conversation in the first place, because that just knocked me off my feet a little bit.
People don't realize that. So here's what's really unfortunate is there are people in the world who may not have a spouse or a friend, or they're older and they've lost their spouses and friends, but they still have to go through this. And we saw it all too often at the hospital. And Dr. Basil L. Reyes, who was the man, and by the way, we did make him famous. He was in 2 local news stories with us. And then when NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt came into our home for 3 hours to film her story after she completed all her treatments, they took video of Dr. L. Reyes and her, and they did it a number of times. So yeah, she did make him famous. He was already quasi-famous. So, the good and the bad, right? They filmed for 3 hours in our home, and it was on Valentine's Day. And they said, well, what are you going to give her for Valentine's? I'm like, who had time to go out and get anything for Valentine's, right?
Yeah, they really put you on the spot there.
They did. And what are you going to do? I'm like, these are the producers beforehand. I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'll cook spaghetti. Okay, we'll come in and I'm like, nobody cares about that. Well, during her time, and this is really important for all of your listeners, you have to find something that puts you in a mental space that is your comfort zone. It could be your favorite song. It could be your favorite poem, and you have to redo it and do it and do it. So when she started her treatments, there was a little ditty about the Champs-Élysées, the Eiffel Tower, and Paris. She's always been infatuated with Paris. So I put that on a loop, and she would listen to it over and over again. And she would just mentally be in Paris, and she would be able to get through her treatments. So knowing that, I had reached out to the Jules Verne restaurant in the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and it took about 3 months in advance to get reservations. It's a small restaurant and a lot of people want to go. Long story short, I got the reservation the day that they came to film at the house. I printed it out in French and in English, and I'd already gotten her this huge card, and I told the producers that, and they said, oh, well, Gary's surprised his wife with a trip to Paris. And I'm saying, no, I surprised my wife with a reservation for dinner. I didn't have anything set for Paris yet. So now 10 million people around the country are going like, they're going to Paris. I'm like, no, we're going to dinner. So now I had to go and put this whole trip together.
They're like, no, you're going to Paris.
They kind of threw me under the bus there. I was like, okay, fine. Long story short, we did on her birthday. We were in Paris at the Jules Verne restaurant. The entire restaurant sang happy birthday to her. It was a fun story that they aired, and we still pay attention to it every once in a while. Within an hour after that aired, people around the world calling her, how they found their number out that quickly, because people want hope. And what I love what you're doing with this podcast is you're providing information, you're providing hope. Hope is the most important thing that everybody needs to take away from your podcast, because I don't care how dire it is. If you're not getting the answers you want from the hospital, the surgeons, the doctors, do not be afraid to stand up, chest thump, and say no, and go elsewhere to look for the person that wants to do what you want to do. I cannot stress that enough. Had we done what that first oncologist said, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation, because she would have died 8 years ago. It's so important that there's hope, and they need to know that. Unfortunately, not all the outcomes are positive. To keep fighting. Jim Valvano, who people know as a coach and from ESPN, the famous thing he always said is, don't give up, don't ever give up. The minute you give up, it wins and you don't.
Yep, 100% agree with you. And I really appreciate as well the kind words that you said, because obviously there is really hard conversations that I have on here with people, and the word needs to be spread. But I agree with you that you need to have something to believe in, and you need to have that hope, because you can't give up on yourself, and you can't give up on the people that you're taking care of, because it's no way to live life. You got to keep trying no matter what it is.
And there are people from all over the world that have reached out to her and called, and she still gets calls. And it's really hard for her. Here's why. Because she's had a positive outcome. And a lot of these people that she's spoken with did not end up having a positive outcome, but they had hope. Spoke with her. She gave them tidbits, suggestions. You know, hey, if you're going to have this treatment, when you go in for this shot 2 days after your chemo treatment, you need to have them bring it up to room temperature. It's a lot easier to take than when they bring it out of the refrigerator. Things like that, right? It gives them hope. It gives them something to look forward to. And it's really hard on her, because she's made some unbelievably great friends who have lost their journey.
Interesting you bring that up, because it is very difficult, that survivor's guilt. And the one piece of advice that I think my father gave me, because I would have these conversations about people that had similar diagnosis to me and they passed away. And I was like, I just feel like that's so unfair. I feel like that's unfair that they lost their fight. And I don't understand why I was the miracle when all of these other people are just as wonderful as me. And he stopped me mid-sentence and was like, you need to stop whatever you're saying right now. You have every right to live. It is so unfortunate that these people passed away, but you have done everything in your power to help anyone that's going through a similar experience.
So Pancreatic Cancer Network, every year they would do a big trip to Washington to meet with senators and congressmen to advocate for additional funding. We did that trip, and we met with senators and congresspeople and so forth. And one of the senators from Georgia at the time, my wife knew for like 30 years before he was in politics, in his previous business. He took that meeting with us and our group because of her. These guys are really busy. It doesn't matter what side of the coin you want. Forget about politics for a minute. They're all really busy and they know that you're going to be there asking for money and so forth. But he took the meeting, and then that night we had a breakout session, if you will, and there was probably 200, 300, 400 people in this one ballroom. And they called on me, and I stood up in front of all these people, and I started talking, and I prefaced it just like I did with you a little while ago. I said, who takes care of the caregiver? And 80% of that room leaned back in their chair and went, oh. Because you're so tunnel visioned on helping that you neglect to do things that you need. You neglect to take your own medicines. You neglect to take your own meals because depending on the person and what you're doing, whether it be a patient advocate or a caregiver, it's a 365, 24/7. It just is. And you have to step back. Say to yourself, I need to be sure I take care of myself first because I can't be a patient alongside of her. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And during her journey, I became a volunteer emergency medical technician responder for knowledge. What if something happened to her? Is there something that I could do before the professionals got there? So I do things with the fire department, fire rescue, and I still do things with them, and I still keep my certifications up. But one of the first things that we're taught is never become victim number 2. The first things we're taught is scene safety. Don't go rushing into something because then now you're another victim and you've just failed that first victim, right? So it's the same thing with you as a caregiver. Don't become a victim yourself. Take care of yourself and then you'll be able to take care of the patient / loved one / friend. And I have run across a number of people who have become patient advocates for anybody in need at the hospital. They don't even know these people, but they don't have a friend. They don't have ways to get to and from doctor's appointments. They don't have ways to go pick up their medications and so forth. I have watched some of these people and my heart goes out to them because they are just giving of their time and energy to be a patient advocate for someone who they didn't even know. And that's what gives me hope about our society.
It's amazing how many selfless people there are out there, especially like yourself. I mean, you are just absolutely amazing. I know when I was planning on speaking with you today, I didn't expect to hear a love story, how this all came to fruition, but I just think it's absolutely awesome, just everything that you've done and have continued to do, and personally gave me some amazing insight that I'm definitely going to be thinking about after this chat, and hopefully to everyone else out there that was listening, they take what you said and apply it to their own lives, because I think you shared some really valuable information and advice.
Thank you. I'll leave you with this, and this has been a wonderful experience, and thank you for inviting me, is stay off the internet. If you are a patient, stay off the internet because you're going to read stuff that is just wackadoodle. Rely on real professionals, real science, real people who have been doing this for a long time. They'll give you the options. They'll give you the correct answer. You may not like the answer, and that's okay. You can go to someone else and get their opinion. You're going to have to go to 2 and 3, sometimes maybe even 4 options, right? Don't take the first word. And here's how I equate it. You're still young and you're just going through this, but those people that are my contemporaries, we didn't marry the first person we ever dated. We didn't choose that person to take care of our life. No, we went through lots of people. And not saying that's bad. That's just the world. Do the same thing with someone who potentially can save your life. Do not settle for the very first person that says, hey, we've got an appointment. Come on in. No, research them, research what they've done, research the institution, and then find out their success rates. Just because they give you an appointment does not mean they are the one. Do not settle. Be your own patient advocate if you do not have one. Bring a notebook with you and take notes at every single meeting. Even if you think it's just, hey, they just want to take my blood pressure. Fine. What was your blood pressure? Write it down. It's so important to do that. I've got a binder that is probably 1.5 feet thick, from notes, receipts, test results, everything from during that time frame and then many years afterwards. So people, stay off the internet, be smart, go directly to that institution and ask the questions directly of them. If you don't like the answer, or if you're having issues at your facility of care, go to administration. Don't walk away upset. They're used to this. They'll accept you in their office. Miss Kelly, why are you having a problem? Well, this surgeon is doing this. They will work with you. Do not just walk away and get ticked off. This is your life. And as far as I know, we only have one, although some people may say they have others. Do the best you can. Never say no and never, ever give up.
I love all of that. You're so passionate and you get fired up about this. And that's how everyone should be. We should get fired up about this because, you have to have that hope and you just have to keep pushing through the hard times and the hard days in order to get some change and spread more awareness about this all. So once again, thank you so much for coming on today. It was just such a pleasure. I hope someone that was listening just gained a little bit of insight from this conversation or had one good takeaway from it. But that is today's episode of Combating Cancer. I just want to thank everyone once again so much for listening and continuing to support. If you or someone would like to come on and share your story or have a business inquiry, please feel free to reach out to me and I will chat with you guys next Wednesday.